Tom sat alone in the corner booth of Chen's Café, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Outside, Christmas lights blinked in the windows of closed shops, and the few people brave enough to venture out on Christmas afternoon hurried past with their heads down against the wind. Inside, the cafe was nearly empty, just him, an elderly couple by the window, and Mrs. Chen herself wiping down the counter with the patient resignation of someone who'd chosen to work on Christmas, so her employees could be with their families. He checked his phone again. No new messages. Just the same photo he'd been staring at all morning, Emma in her new Christmas pajamas, holding up a stuffed unicorn her mother had given her, smiling that big gap-toothed smile that made Tom's chest hurt. His ex-wife had sent it 2 hours ago with a caption that said, "Emma wanted you to see her favorite present," like that was supposed to make him feel better. Like seeing his 8-year-old daughter celebrate Christmas 3,000 miles away in California was somehow the same as actually being there. It wasn't the same. It would never be the same. Tom had called Emma this morning, their scheduled FaceTime at 9 o'clock sharp, because God forbid he deviate from the custody agreement even on Christmas. She'd been excited, talking a mile a minute about the presents under the tree and the big breakfast. Mommy and Steve made Steve the new husband. The reason his ex-wife had moved across the country 6 months ago and taken Emma with her. Emma had shown him every gift, held them up to the camera like offerings, and Tom had smiled and said all the right things. Told her he was happy for her, told her he loved her, told her he'd see her next week for New Year's. But when she'd asked, her voice going quiet and serious, "Daddy, are you okay? Are you having a good Christmas?" He'd lied right to her face. "Of course, sweetheart, I'm having a great day." The truth was, he'd been sitting in this cafe since noon because the alternative was going home to his empty house where Emma's room sat untouched, where her artwork still covered the refrigerator, where every corner reminded him that he used to be a full-time father and now he was just a voice on a phone screen every other evening and a visitor every other weekend. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. Not messy, not dramatic, just the slow, bureaucratic dissolution of 8 years of marriage. His ex-wife had gotten the job offer in San Diego, her dream position at a tech company, and when Tom said he couldn't leave his construction business, couldn't uproot his entire life, she'd looked at him like he was being selfish. Like asking to stay in the town where they'd built their life together was somehow unreasonable. The court had given her primary custody. Tom got alternating weekends and holidays. This was her Christmas. Next year would be his. That's how it worked now. Their daughter's life divided up like assets in a settlement. Tom rubbed his face with both hands. He'd told himself he'd be fine, that he'd spend today working on the house, maybe watch a movie, treat it like any other day. But when he'd woken up this morning to silence no, Emma jumping on his bed demanding they go downstairs to see if Santa came, no chaos of wrapping paper and squealing excitement, he'd realized he had no idea how to survive this day. So he'd driven to the only place open and sat here for 2 hours, nursing one cup of coffee while Mrs. Chen pretended not to notice. A family came in through the front door, letting in a blast of cold air. Parents with 2 kids, maybe 5 and 7, all bundled in matching scarves. The kids were arguing about whether hot chocolate or apple cider was better, while their parents exchanged that look, the exhausted but amused look of people who loved each other and their chaotic children. Tom watched them settle into a booth across the cafe, watched the father help his daughter out of her coat, watched the mother wipe chocolate off her son's face with a napkin, and felt something dark and bitter twist in his gut. That used to be him. That used to be his life. He looked back down at his phone, at Emma's picture, and wondered if she was thinking about him right now, or if she was too busy being happy in her new life with her mother and Steve and their big house in San Diego with a pool and a yard, and all the things Tom couldn't give her on a construction file. Rem and salary. "Are you okay?" Tom looked up sharply. A little girl stood beside his table, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with dark curly hair pulled into 2 slightly lopsided ponytails. She wore a red Christmas dress that was a size too big, the hem brushing her knees, and she held a half-eaten sugar cookie in one hand. Her eyes were huge and brown and fixed on him with the kind of serious concern that looked almost funny on such a small face. Tom blinked, caught off guard. "What? Are you okay?" the girl repeated, like it was the most natural question in the world to ask a stranger. "You look sad." Before Tom could formulate a response, a woman rushed over from a nearby table. "Maya, sweetheart, I'm so sorry," she said, slightly breathless. She put a hand on the girl's shoulder and looked at Tom with an apologetic expression. "She just wandered off. I hope she wasn't bothering you. No, it's Tom started. But he couldn't quite finish the sentence because the little girl Maya was still staring at him with those concerned eyes, waiting for an answer. You look sad, Maya said again, more insistent this time. Like my mommy sometimes. Like you're trying not to cry. Maya, the woman said, her cheeks flushing. That's not. We don't say things like that to people. But Tom saw it then, looking at the woman properly for the first time. She was young, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes and dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her coat was worn. The kind you wore because it was warm and you couldn't afford to care about fashion. Her hands were rough, the hands of someone who worked hard. And in her face, behind the embarrassment, was something Tom recognized immediately because he'd seen it in the mirror every day for 6 months. Grief, loneliness. The exhausted weight of trying to hold everything together when everything felt broken. It's okay, Tom said, and he meant it. He looked at Maya and managed something that was almost a smile. I am a little sad. You're very observant. Maya nodded seriously, like he'd confirmed something important. Then she held out her cookie. Do you want half? Cookies make everything better. That's what Mommy says. The woman, Maya's mother, closed her eyes briefly like she was gathering patience. Maya, we don't give our food to strangers, and we definitely don't make them feel bad by pointing out when they're sad. She looked at Tom again. I'm really sorry. She's very direct. No, it's fine, really. Tom surprised himself by meaning it. There was something disarming about the kid's blunt honesty, something that cut through the fog of self-pity he'd been drowning in all day. But Maya wasn't done. She looked up at her mother and said, with the absolute certainty only children possess, He's alone on Christmas, Mommy. Nobody should be alone on Christmas. You said that, remember? You said it this morning. The mother's expression crumpled slightly before she caught herself. Tom saw her swallow hard, saw her glance away like she was fighting her own battle against tears. When she looked back at him, there was understanding in her eyes that went beyond polite sympathy. I did say that, she admitted quietly. Then, extending her hand, I'm Sarah, and this is Maya, my very persistent daughter. Tom shook her hand. Her grip was firm despite the roughness of her palm. Tom, can you sit with us? Maya asked immediately, tugging on her mother's sleeve. Please, we have extra cookies. And you said we should be kind to people who are alone and, Maya. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. She looked at Tom with a mixture of apology and something else, hope, maybe, or just the same bone-deep loneliness he was feeling. I don't want to impose. I'm sure you'd rather. I've been sitting here alone for 2 hours, Tom said, the words coming out before he could stop them. If the offer's genuine, I'd actually really appreciate the company. Sarah studied his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there made her nod slowly. It's genuine. We're just having hot chocolate and cookies. Nothing fancy. But if you want to join us... She paused, then added quietly, It's our first Christmas alone, too. Maya's father passed away last year. The weight of those words settled between them. Tom looked at Maya, who had already grabbed his hand and started pulling him toward their booth, and saw it now. The shadow behind her Christmas cheer, the way she held on to her mother's coat like an anchor. The grief she was probably too young to fully understand, but carried anyway. I'm sorry, Tom said as he stood, letting Maya lead him across the cafe. Sarah followed, wrapping her arms around herself. Thank you, it's been hard, especially today. They settled into the corner booth, Sarah on one side, Tom and Maya on the other, though Maya immediately started rearranging so she could sit between them. On the table were 2 mugs of hot chocolate, half empty, and a small plate of Christmas cookies. They were the cheap kind from the grocery store, sugar cookies with colored frosting, but they'd been arranged carefully like they mattered. Maya pushed the plate toward Tom. You can have the green one. That's a Christmas tree. I already ate the snowman. Thank you. Tom took the cookie, not because he was hungry, but because Maya was watching him with such earnest expectation. He bit into it, too sweet, a little stale, and nodded. It's good. Maya beamed like he'd given her a gift. Then she launched into a stream of consciousness that reminded Tom painfully of Emma at that age. We made cookies yesterday, me and Mommy. We burned some of them because the oven is weird and gets too hot, but we ate them anyway because Mommy said it's not Christmas without burnt cookies. And Santa came last night and brought me a baby doll and some books, and Grandma sent me art supplies, and Mommy got me new shoes because my old ones had holes. Do you have kids? The question hit harder than it should have. Tom set down the half-eaten cookie. Yeah. A daughter. Emma. She's 8. Where is she? Maya asked with the innocent directness children specialized in. With her mom, in California. Tom tried to keep his voice neutral, but Sarah must have heard something in it because she gave him a look that said she understood exactly what those simple words meant. Do you miss her? Maya asked. Tom's throat tightened. Yeah, a lot. I miss my daddy too, Maya said matter-of-factly. He's in heaven now. Mommy says he's watching over us and that's why we still talk to him at night before bed. Do you talk to Emma? Not as much as I'd like, Tom admitted, but we video call every other day, and I'll see her next week. That's good, Maya said seriously. It's important to talk to people you love, even if they're far away. Sarah reached over and smoothed Maya's hair with a tenderness that made Tom's chest ache. That's right, baby. If you're feeling this story, if these words are hitting somewhere deep, please hit that like button and subscribe. Because what happens next will show you that sometimes the people who save you are the ones who need saving too. They sat there in that corner booth while the afternoon faded into evening, while other customers came and went, while Mrs. Chen refilled their hot chocolate without being asked. Maya talked constantly about school, about her best friend who moved away last month, about the cat she wanted but they couldn't afford, about her daddy and the things she remembered and the things she'd forgotten. Sarah listened patiently, occasionally meeting Tom's eyes with apologetic smiles that said she knew her daughter talked a lot, but thank you for listening. And Tom did listen, really listened, because Maya's chatter filled the silence that had been suffocating him all day, and because watching Sarah with her daughter reminded him that he wasn't the only one fighting to stay afloat. At some point, Sarah started talking too, explaining that she worked 2 jobs days at a medical supply company, evenings tutoring when she could get clients. That money was tight, but they were managing. That her husband's death had been sudden, unexpected, and she was still figuring out how to be both parents to Maya. How do you do it? Tom asked. Alone with a kid? Sarah's laugh was soft and sad. Not well most days. I burn dinner and forget permission slips. And sometimes I cry in the bathroom after Maya goes to bed because I'm so tired I can't see straight. But she keeps me going. Kids have this way of forcing you to show up even when you want to disappear. Tom understood that. Emma had been the only reason he got out of bed most mornings after the divorce. The only reason he kept the house clean and went to work and pretended to be functional. It doesn't get easier, Sarah said quietly, watching Maya, who had gotten up to look at the Christmas tree Mrs. Chen had set up in the corner, missing someone. Whether they're gone because they died or because they moved away or because life just pulled you apart, you don't stop missing them, you just learn to carry it differently. How long does that take? Tom asked. I don't know yet. I'll tell you when I figure it out. Maya returned with a candy cane she'd apparently taken from the tree. Mrs. Chen must have told her it was okay, and held it out to Tom with both hands like it was precious. For you, she said solemnly. So you remember you're not alone. Me and Mommy are your friends now. Tom took the candy cane, and his vision blurred slightly. He blinked hard and managed to keep his voice steady when he said, Thank you, Maya. That's really kind. You're welcome. Friends help each other feel better. They stayed until Mrs. Chen started cleaning up for closing. The 3 of them in that corner booth talking about everything and nothing. The kind of conversation that happens when strangers realize they understand each other in ways that matter. When they finally stood to leave, Tom's legs were stiff from sitting so long, but the crushing weight that had been on his chest all day felt lighter. In the parking lot, under the strings of Christmas lights that decorated the cafe's exterior, they stood in the cold saying goodbye. Maya was yawning, leaning heavily against her mother's legs, exhausted from a full day of Christmas and new friends. Sarah looked at Tom with an expression that was tentative but genuine. We come here most Sundays, around 2 o'clock, if you ever want company. Tom knew what she was really saying, that this didn't have to be a one-time thing, that maybe they could all use friends who understood what it meant to survive holidays alone, to carry grief and loneliness like weights they'd learned to balance but never put down. I'd like that, he said. Thank you. For today. For letting Maya drag me over. I needed this more than I realized. So did we, Sarah said simply. Maya lifted her head from her mother's side long enough to wave. Bye, Tom. Don't be sad anymore, okay? I'll try, Tom promised. He watched them walk to their car, an old sedan with rust spots on the doors, and waited until Sarah pulled out of the parking lot before heading to his own truck. Maya waved frantically from the back window, and Tom waved back, standing in the cold until their taillights disappeared down the street. Then he sat in his truck for a long moment, engine running, heat blasting, staring at nothing. He pulled out his phone and looked at Emma's picture again, still smiling, still 3,000 miles away, still the center of his world even when she wasn't here. But the crushing loneliness that had driven him to that cafe this afternoon had shifted into something different. Not gone, it would probably never be completely gone, but manageable, bearable, bearable. Because a little girl had looked at him with concerned eyes and asked if he was okay, and for the first time in 6 months, Tom had admitted, if only to himself, that he wasn't. But maybe, with time and unexpected friendships and the simple act of showing up, he could be. He texted Emma goodnight, even though she was probably already asleep, told her he loved her, told her he'd call tomorrow. Then he drove home through streets decorated with Christmas lights, past houses full of families he wasn't part of anymore, to an empty house that felt a little less empty than it had this morning. Because he'd spent Christmas Day with strangers who became friends. Because he'd been reminded that other people existed beyond his own suffering. Because a 6-year-old girl had offered him half her cookie and told him nobody should be alone on Christmas. And for tonight, that was enough. Tom did go back the next Sunday. He told himself it was just to say thank you properly, to make sure Maya and Sarah knew he appreciated what they'd done for him on Christmas. But the truth was he'd thought about them every day that week, about Maya's earnest face asking if he was okay, about Sarah's quiet understanding that came from carrying her own grief, about the way sitting in that booth with them had made him feel less like he was drowning. He arrived at Chen's Café at 2 o'clock exactly, nervous in a way that felt ridiculous for a man his age. What if they didn't show? What if they'd only invited him out of pity and hadn't expected him to actually come back? But when he walked through the door, there they were in the same corner booth, and Maya's face lit up like he'd given her the best present in the world. "Tom, you came. Mommy, he came." Sarah looked up from the book she'd been reading and smiled, and Tom felt something in his chest unclench. "Hi, I hope it's okay that I actually took you up on the offer." "Of course it is," Sarah said, gesturing to the empty seat across from them. "We were hoping you would." And just like that, it became routine. Every Sunday at 2 o'clock, Tom met Sarah and Maya at the cafe. Sometimes they talked about heavy things, the divorce, Sarah's husband's death, the loneliness of single parenthood, how hard it was to keep functioning when part of you wanted to give up. Sometimes they talked about nothing important at all. Maya's school projects, Tom's work stories, the shows they were watching, the weather, Mrs. Plig. Chen started bringing their orders without asking, knowing Tom wanted black coffee, Sarah preferred tea, and Maya would get hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. Sometimes Maya did homework at the table, her tongue poking out in concentration while she worked on math problems. Sometimes she colored, making elaborate drawings that she'd present to Tom at the end of the afternoon with serious ceremony. Sometimes she just talked, that constant stream of 6-year-old observations about the world that somehow made everything feel more manageable. Tom's video calls with Emma started to change too. She noticed immediately. "Dad, you're smiling more," she said one evening, peering at him through the screen with those perceptive 8-year-old eyes. "Am I?" "Yeah. You look happier. Did something good happen?" Tom hesitated, then decided honesty was better than evasion. "I made some friends. A lady named Sarah and her daughter Maya. I met them on Christmas, actually, at that cafe I told you about." Emma's eyes widened with interest. "Really? How old is Maya?" 6, 7 in March. "Does she go to school here?" "Yeah, Jefferson Elementary." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she asked, "Do you like them? Sarah and Maya?" Tom thought about how to answer that. "Yeah, I do. They're good people. They understand what it's like to miss someone." Emma nodded slowly. "I'm glad you have friends, Dad. I didn't like thinking about you being alone all the time." The conversation stuck with Tom. His 8-year-old daughter had been worrying about him being lonely while she was 3,000 miles away. The guilt of that cut deep, but also the relief that she wanted him to be happy, that she didn't resent him finding connection with other people. 3 months after that first Christmas meeting, Sarah and Tom had fallen into an easy friendship that felt as natural as breathing. They texted during the week, nothing romantic, just small updates about their days, funny things Maya had said, commiseration about work stress and parenting struggles. Tom found himself looking forward to those messages almost as much as the Sunday afternoon meetups. One week in late March, Tom did something that felt significant even though he tried to downplay it. He invited Sarah and Maya to his house for dinner. "You don't have to," Sarah said when he suggested it, but he could see she was pleased. "We're fine just meeting at the cafe. I know, but I want to. I mean, if you're comfortable with it, no pressure." Sarah studied him for a long moment, and Tom wondered what she saw. Then she smiled. "Okay, that would be nice." So, on a Saturday evening, not a Sunday, which felt important somehow, like they were breaking pattern, evolving Sarah and Maya showed up at Tom's front door. Maya was bouncing with excitement, holding a folder of drawings she'd made specifically for Tom's refrigerator. Sarah carried a bottle of wine and looked nervous in a way Tom had never seen before. "This is weird, right?" she said as he led them inside. "Coming to your house feels different than the cafe." Good different or bad different? I don't know yet. They cooked together in Tom's kitchen that had been silent for too long. Tom made spaghetti the one meal he could reliably prepare without disaster, while Sarah helped, and Maya sat at the kitchen table arranging her drawings in careful order. Every so often she'd hold one up for approval, and Tom or Sarah would stop what they were doing to admire it properly. After dinner, Maya discovered Tom's small collection of movies and insisted they watch Moana. She fell asleep halfway through, curled up on the couch with her head on a pillow, one hand still holding the blanket Tom had given her. Tom and Sarah sat on opposite ends of the couch with Maya between them, and for a while they just watched the movie in comfortable silence. But eventually Sarah spoke, her voice quiet so as not to wake Maya. "Can I tell you something? Something I haven't told many people." Tom's stomach tightened with sudden apprehension. "Of course." Sarah stared at the TV screen, but Tom could tell she wasn't really watching. She was gathering courage. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Daniel, Maya's father, he didn't just pass away, he died by suicide." Tom went completely still. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the screen, like if she looked at him she might lose her nerve. "He struggled with depression for years," she continued. "I knew. I tried to help. We did therapy, tried different medications, everything we could think of. But it was like fighting a tide that just kept pulling him further out. The week before Christmas 2 years ago, he left for work one morning and never came home. They found his truck at the state park. He'd left a note in the glove compartment." Her voice cracked. "The note said he loved us. Said he loved Maya more than anything in the world, but that he couldn't be the father and husband we deserved. That his depression was too heavy, that he was dragging us down with him, that we'd be better off without him." Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now. "Maya doesn't know. She was only 4 when it happened. I told her Daddy got sick very suddenly, that his body just stopped working. It's not entirely a lie. Depression is a sickness. But someday I'll have to tell her the whole truth, and I'm terrified of that conversation. Terrified of her understanding that her father chose to leave." Tom reached across Maya's sleeping form and took Sarah's hand. She gripped it like a lifeline. "I'm telling you this because I need you to understand what you're getting into," Sarah said, finally looking at him. Her eyes were red and raw. "I'm terrified of letting anyone into our lives again, of trusting that they'll stay, of Maya getting attached to someone who might disappear. Daniel's death taught me that love doesn't guarantee permanence, that sometimes people you love choose to go anyway, and there's nothing you can do about it." Tom squeezed her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." "You can't promise that," Sarah whispered. "Nobody can. Life happens, things change, people leave." "You're right," Tom admitted. "I can't promise I'll never leave. I can't promise nothing will ever go wrong, or that we'll all live happily ever after like some fairy tale. But I can promise that if I'm in your life and Maya's life, I'll show up. I'll be honest. I won't disappear without explanation. I won't make you wonder what happened or what you did wrong." Sarah wiped her eyes with her free hand. "Why are you doing this? Why do you keep coming back every Sunday?" "Maya and I were complicated. Broken. We come with so much baggage." Tom laughed softly. "Sarah, I'm a divorced single dad who spent last Christmas alone in a cafe feeling sorry for himself. You think you're the only one who's broken? You think you're the only one with baggage?" He leaned forward, careful not to disturb Maya. "I keep coming back because that day in the cafe, Maya asked if I was okay, and nobody had asked me that in months. Because you understood what it meant to miss someone, even when you're trying to move forward. Because being with you and Maya reminds me that I'm still human, still capable of caring about something beyond my own pain." If you're feeling this story, if these words are hitting somewhere deep, please hit that like button and subscribe. Because what happens next will show you that families aren't just born, they're built by people brave enough to love again despite the risk. And because, Tom continued, Emma FaceTimed me last week and said she can't wait to meet the little girl I keep talking about. She's happy I found friends. My 8-year-old daughter, who could resent you both, wants me to not be alone. That means something. Sarah was crying openly now. I'm so scared, Tom, of letting this matter, of letting Maya get attached, of getting attached myself and then losing someone again. I'm scared too, Tom admitted. Terrified, actually. But I think that means it matters. I don't want to spend the rest of my life so afraid of losing people that I never let anyone in. They sat in silence for a long time, holding hands across Maya's sleeping form, while the movie played on and the evening deepened into night. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a promise of forever. It was just two broken people choosing to be less alone together. The weeks that followed felt different. Not dramatically, they still met on Sundays, still texted during the week, but there was a new understanding between them, an acknowledgement that whatever they were building mattered more than either of them wanted to admit. When Emma came home for spring break in April, Tom was nervous in a way that surprised him. He picked her up at the airport, and on the drive home he found himself gripping the steering wheel too tight. "Dad, you're being weird," Emma said, watching him with concern. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. There are some people I want you to meet, if that's okay with you." Emma studied him with those two wise eyes. The lady and the little girl, Sarah and Maya? Yeah, you don't have to, if you don't want to. I just thought, do you love her? Emma asked bluntly. Tom was so surprised he almost swerved. What, Sarah? Do you love her? Tom considered this carefully. I don't know yet, but I care about her. And Maya. They're important to me. Emma was quiet for several minutes, staring out the window at the familiar streets of their town. Finally, she said, I want to meet them. I want to make sure they're nice to you. Tom's throat tightened. Thanks, kiddo. The meeting happened at Chen's Café because it felt like neutral ground, safe territory where everyone could relax. Mrs. Chen greeted Emma like long-lost family she'd heard plenty about Tom's daughter over the past months, and brought her hot chocolate without asking. Maya was initially shy, hiding behind her mother's arm and peeking out at Emma with uncertain eyes. But Emma, to Tom's immense pride, crouched down to Maya's level and said, Hi, I'm Emma. My dad says you're really good at drawing. Maya's face lit up. I am. Do you like drawing? I love it. Maybe you could show me sometime? And just like that, the ice was broken. Within 20 minutes, they were sitting together at the table, heads bent over Maya's folder of drawings, giggling about something Tom couldn't quite hear. Sarah and Tom watched their daughters together, and Sarah reached for his hand under the table. She's wonderful, Sarah whispered. You did a good job. So did you, Tom said, nodding toward Maya. Emma looked over at that moment and saw their hands touching under the table. Her expression flickered with something Tom couldn't quite read, surprise, maybe, or assessment. But then she smiled. A real smile. The first genuine one Tom had seen from her in months. She looked at Sarah and said, It's nice to meet you. My dad talks about you and Maya all the time. Sarah's eyes glistened. It's nice to meet you too, Emma. Your dad talks about you constantly. He's very proud of you. The afternoon stretched into evening. They ordered sandwiches for dinner because nobody wanted to leave, and Mrs. Chen seemed delighted to have her cafe full of this makeshift family. Tom caught her watching them at one point with a satisfied smile, like she'd orchestrated the whole thing herself. That night, after Sarah and Maya had gone home and Emma was getting ready for bed, she appeared in Tom's doorway wearing her pajamas and looking thoughtful. I like them, she announced, climbing onto his bed like she used to when she was smaller. Sarah's nice, and Maya's really funny. Yeah? Tom tried to keep his voice casual. Yeah? Emma picked at the comforter. Dad? Are you still sad about Mom? Tom thought about this carefully. Sometimes, but not like I was. I'm learning that things don't always work out the way we plan, but that doesn't mean they can't work out in other ways. Like finding Sarah and Maya? Like finding Sarah and Maya. Emma hugged him suddenly, fiercely. I'm glad you're not alone anymore. I worry about you when I'm in California. Tom held his daughter close and felt his eyes burn. I worry about you too. But I'm okay, Em. I really am. Good, Emma said into his shoulder. Because Maya told me you're like a second dad to her now, and that means you have to stick around. The months that followed were a lesson in patience and trust. Sarah and Tom took things slowly, careful of Maya's attachment, careful of their own hearts that had been broken in different ways. They had dinner together once a week. They took the girls to the park, to the movies, to the aquarium. They built something that looked like family but felt fragile, like one wrong move could shatter it. Summer came. Emma flew back for 6 weeks, and Sarah's small apartment suddenly felt too cramped for all of them. So Tom's house became their gathering place. Emma and Maya shared Emma's room during sleepovers, their giggles echoing through walls that had been too quiet for too long. One evening in August, Tom and Sarah sat on his back porch after the girls had gone to bed, drinking wine and watching fireflies. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, and Tom wrapped his arm around her, and it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years. "I think I'm falling in love with you," Sarah said quietly, "and it terrifies me." Tom kissed the top of her head. "I think I've already fallen. And you're right, it's terrifying. What do we do about it? I don't know. Keep showing up, I guess. Keep choosing this even when it's scary." Sarah lifted her head to look at him. "You promise you'll tell me if you need space. If this gets to be too much, I promise. Same goes for you." She kissed him then, soft and tentative and full of hope. And Tom kissed her back, tasting wine and possibility and the future they were carefully building together. They didn't rush into anything, didn't move in together or make grand pronouncements, just kept showing up for each other, week after week, month after month, learning each other's rhythms, their triggers, their needs, learning how to be partners while also being parents, how to blend their broken pieces into something that wasn't perfect but was theirs. Christmas came again. 1 year after Tom had sat alone in that cafe feeling like his life was over. This time his kitchen was full of noise and life and love. Maya and Emma were decorating cookies, getting more frosting on each other than the actual cookies. Sarah was laughing at something Mrs. Chen said yes. Mrs. Chen said yes. Chen, who they'd invited because she'd witnessed that first meeting and insisted she was part of the family now. Even Emma's mother called, briefly, to wish everyone Merry Christmas. The conversation was civil, almost friendly. Progress, Tom thought, not perfection, but progress. Tom stood in his kitchen doorway watching this scene. Maya ran over with a cookie she'd decorated, a lopsided Christmas tree covered in too many sprinkles. "This is for you," she said seriously, "for reminding us we're not alone." Tom took the cookie, his throat tight. "Thank you, Maya, for everything." Because it had been her question, simple and sincere, that started all of this. "Are you okay?" 3 words from a 6-year-old that reminded him other people existed beyond his suffering. 3 words that led to Sunday afternoons and shared grief and slowly built trust. 3 words that gave him back his life. That night, after everyone had gone home and Emma was asleep, Tom stood at his window watching snowfall. He thought about last Christmas, about how certain he'd been that he'd lost everything, how wrong he'd been. His phone buzzed. "Sarah, Maya wants to know if Emma can come over tomorrow to build a snowman. Also, I want to know if you're free for coffee after." Tom smiled and typed back, "Yes to both. See you tomorrow." He looked around his house at Emma's painting on the refrigerator next to Maya's drawings, at the life he'd rebuilt from ruins. Outside, snow kept falling, covering everything in white, making the world new again. He wasn't alone anymore, and neither were they. They were a family, unconventional and imperfect and built from broken pieces, but a family nonetheless. And that was more than enough. That was everything.